Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and very prestigious and august panelists. I just heard Professor Swaran Singh talking out as to what can be the India's proactive neutrality and how probably this can be, enforced when we take a position in the foreign policy. So if you look at the importance of defense indigenization through that prism, all of us will intuitively say, yes, if we have our own defense prowess based on our own defense equipment, indigenous defense equipment, it's always a great idea, since you can assert yourself and powerful nations have the policies and have the power to impress upon their policies, and they can really weaponize their policies to keep their influence going or to enhance their influence. So as I heard General Kochar also, who talked a lot about why this indigenization is required. Professor Swaran Singh also pointed to this, and Ambassador Tringnagnath, he also mentioned about it in his own way, the way he gave examples. And in a way, it came out that since the dawn of civilization, relationships have been defined by the way you possess the defensive and offensive power with you. Now, this being the case, I think I should pepper, when I'm deep into the session, my talk, because I think there are two aspects of this defense indigenization. One is why. The why has been attended to by my previous speakers in a very lucid and very compelling manner. What remains for me with my experience to share and pepper my talk is to how are we going to do it? What are the hows of this talk? So how are we going to achieve as a nation state so that it has defense indigenization powers the Indian state to take its own foreign policy positions as much as possible for its interests. So we see Ukraine's desire to be part of NATO alliance, which is a military alliance, triggered the threat perception held by the Russia. And it may be noted here that a military operation is normally undertaken when the invading nation feels that it's multiple times superior militarily to the nation is going to invade, because it takes a lot of more resources to bow down a nation than militarily than what the other nation has. So you have to be militarily very superior, and this we have seen in all cases, that wherever US intervened, it was able to change the regime, it was able to go there, but being there for all the time, we know by the US experience too, is not possible. So here I want to pitch a point that if we look in this context of defense indigenization or your own weapon systems, you see that almost all firepower held by Ukrainian army, air force and navy is primarily of Soviet origin. So there is a great dependence of Ukraine to fight its war on Russia, because supply lines mostly are there. And therefore, the dimension which has emerged, that they are not seen to be fighting a war the way it should have been fought by a nation, is because Russia already knows their order of battle. It knows what they have and knows how to counter them. Though in the fog of war, you get information or you get projections, which are maybe primarily for building up the perception. So I'll not go into that. If we look at our mosaic of equipment, see, we have source our equipment from large number of countries. And prime amongst them are Russia, France, UK, and Israel. We are also dependent on Ukraine for Air 32 fleet and aero engines for Me series of helicopters like Me-17 and Me-35. I'm sure our foreign policy makers are fully aware of this and are tempering their do's and don'ts accordingly. Our stand to abstain in UNGA and UNSC may be a consequence of this, amongst other factors. Now the question is, what is meant by defense indigenization in globally connected and interdependent world? Let me point out here to the audience here that our LCA, which we say is indigenous, is actually runs on G engines, which are of US origins. So are we truly indigenous? There are, so our foreign policy gives us that political leverage to be dependent on a country with whom we feel that we can continue to be dependent while we make majority of indigenization, or we do the majority of indigenization of defense weapon systems, or establish the ecosystem within our own countries. But I think in decades to come, the interdependence will continue. As was pointed out by Professor Swaran Singh also, that we'll have to make our choices in foreign policy in a manner, and that's where I think the proactive neutrality fits in very well. Because I feel the interdependence, whether it's for defense indigenization or other items which we need for national progress, will continue to be coming there. I say so because I have seen, as we are trying to, kind of mitigate our position, because primarily we have been, assemblers of all the equipment which we have been calling so far, before 2014, as indigenous, whether it's the backbone of Indian Air Force in terms of Su-30 MKI, which we have in great numbers, that is 272. We were assembling the equipment. We were really not going into various levels of, the first tier, second tier, third tier, where the ecosystem was not with us. If an order was placed on HAL would still be, sourcing the assembled equipment, what we call, below final level assembly equipment, and then major equipment, and then assembling them together in their hangars. It'll come out from the HAL hangar, but they'll be not less than 80% dependence in terms of money also on the foreign sources. So that is the context in which we are trying to tweak our Atmanirbharta or indigenization. Let's see what is the global context in this area. I think it has come out very clearly, the kinetics of war is conducted in land, air, and sea, but there are other planes like space, like electronic warfare, like cyber warfare, like, your financial system being weaponized. So all these systems can also be weaponized. So when we say defense indigenization, that means we need to be dominant technology-wise also in these spaces. Whether it is a space, electronics warfare, that means you make your own chips, you write your own software operating systems, which run on mobile platforms or the computers, or you have your own offensive and defensive capability for the information warfare, or you have your own financial systems. Because any part of the system, apart from the natural resources which a country possesses, I'm not here talking about the oil, which itself is a great kind of weapon. Everything can be weaponized. So when we talk about defense indigenization, if we develop the interdependence of other countries on us for the defense equipment, I think we'll be better placed in this complex scenario to talk about our own interests, national interests. The one point which comes very clearly, that you not only win with this, you also win in the perception management, where social media, electronic media, and the visual media, print media, they all play a great role. So you may see in the current crisis that fog of war emerging very strongly. The voices or the arguments or the compelling reasons of one side is not being presented so much, either in television channels or by the intellectuals who put this. Then there are policies, sanctions. Most relevant for us would be CAATSA, countering America's adversaries through Sanctions Act. Why I talk about it? Because when we talk of S-400, which is being inducted, this dagger is hanging on our head. Then there are barriers like ITAR, International Traffic in Arms Regulation. There is a uh, munitions list, which has both the kinds of items, the items which can be used for military purposes. I have faced this personally, so I have an experience. BDL, I was director of production there. We were making missiles, and we were on the entity list before Obama administration came in. It was so difficult for us to get any kind of precision equipment or any kind of 5G or 5 axis or 6 axis kind of machines to do our work, mechanical work. The reason was that everyone did, kind of shied away under this ITAR not to sell these items to us, being on entity list. Luckily, when Obama administration came up, they put us off this list. There was a huge burden on the company for not to do any kind of R&D or to really move ahead. And at this point of time, what makes me proud of our IGDMP program, because we luckily are more or less independent or indigenous in terms of our strategic missiles like Agni, Prithvi, that was being manufactured in a company. So Atmanirbharta, which is coming out as a Government of India initiative, becomes very important mirror for all the people who are in the defense industry to see that, yes, if this is the perspective as a nation, if not in short term, in long term, we have to become Atmanirbhar on our own weapon systems, because nobody will give you the best weapon which they have. You'll always get tier 2 weapon for you to fight for. And that will, the moment you get weapons from some country, you become dependent on that country. If you see today, we are so dependent, our 60 to 65% equipment, be in Air Force, Army, Navy. If we talk about tanks, we talk about missiles, we talk about our nuclear submarine, we talk about our aircraft carrier, or we talk about our fighter jets. We are dependent on the Russian bloc or Russia. So our foreign policy will be tempered by that. We cannot take a kind of agnostic approach. We need to be very careful about it. So let's say this has given us what Government of India is doing. How are we going to handle this situation? If we talk about that, Atmanirbharta is trying to, let's say, translate itself into a concept and into a method where the first thing which I attempted at was strategic partnership. The strategic partnership came in whereby it was accepted as a concept, because before that, I was in a defense public sector undertaking. Before that, only defense public sector undertakings used to get all the orders on nomination basis. It was decided to enable our private sector, to kind of place our private sector on a forum that they become part of this defense indigenous manufacturing. Then only the ecosystem, probably the defense industrial ecosystem, could come and be in place. That strategic partnership gave rise to one order, which is very important order. C-295 aircraft for the Indian Air Force, this is the first one, was contracted to a private sector company run by Tata, that is TSL. It was a great beginning. Then we came up, we earlier used to call our defense procurement procedure. When you bought any equipment, we used to call it defense procurement procedure. We used to procure. It got changed by its name also. It was called as defense acquisition procedure. Acquisition is you're acquiring certain degree of capability. That capability will come not only from assembly, it will also come from technology transfer. It is not transfer of production only. It should be transfer of technology also. It's not only know how, it has to be know why. Because if you have the know why, the upgrades, the modernization, the refurbishment, Indian companies can do on their own. It became very important. Then there was a push for make 1, make 2, make 3 in the same DAP 2020. This gave rise to, if you have some proposal, which was on the lines of DARPA, you can suo moto approach the Government of India or MOD, give you a proposal. If it works fine, it can be sort of accepted, and you can be assured of certain orders. In that context, It's a subject by itself. In that context, it was a very great initiative. What I see in 2019, Government of India, MOD recognized the importance of AI, artificial intelligence. They also recognized the importance of that we are moving from semi-autonomous to autonomous to fully autonomous. In semi-autonomous, the man is in the loop. In autonomous, the man is outside the loop, but he can intervene in time which is effectively within the time. And in fully autonomous, the man cannot intervene timely. Is the machine which takes the decision. If we, there are, the great thinker or the futurologist, Yuval Noah Harari, he went on to say that we'll be fighting, 10 years hence, we'll be fighting the wars with inorganic soldiers. That means we are going to have machines fighting the wars for us. So all equipment, all your missiles, all your aircraft are going to be AI enabled. I myself saw one demonstration wherein an F-16, which was piloted by an ace pilot, was put in combat with an F-16 as on experimental basis by DARPA, piloted by AI. And the result was that the one which was piloted by AI, after having learned through several sorties, was able to dominate and kill the aircraft run by ace pilot 5-0. So that was a kind of message. There are a lot of ethical concerns on that. I will not go into that, but this is what is happening. So we came up with what we call DIPA. Government recognized this and they come up with a concept called Defense Artificial Intelligence Project Agency. At least it has been recognized. Today, if we go to WIPO, we find that in filing of IPR by China is only next to US and not by a great margin. So that means as far as technology is concerned, we ought to do something about it so that we remain technologically relevant and ahead. This is a very important takeaway from this. We talk about the indigenous manufacturing where very good green shoots are there. I still call them green shoots, that we have not really mastered the art of manufacturing everything we need, like Akash. Akash surface to air missile system is a very good initiative, but I would like to inform here, it took nearly 30 years for it to really mature from the concept paper to induction. We have LCA, again, it took the similar amount of time. LCA is still going through various variants, and we hope that this will be in middle of the Indian Air Force inventory. This is one aircraft which is going to fill it. As I mentioned to you, it will not be fully indigenous, will be still interdependent, and that's not a... BrahMos is one initiative, one concept which I think it proliferates, because BrahMos is a public company but works like a private company, because the equity shareholding there is, as per the Companies Act, the Indian government has 50.5%, the Russian government has 49.5%, and if nobody has 51%, it becomes a private company, which is overseen by the government or by the DRDO. But that's a very good concept because it gives them the leverage to retain expertise and to retain the manpower the way they want to, and have their own manpower, not through the structure as we have public sector companies. So I will like to just say a few things about what we need to really think about, what we need to really do about this how. Because how will decide, make us, if we become defense equipment manufacturing, if this comes into in a big way and we are nearly independent, I would not say totally independent, we are nearly independent, it will give us a pole position in deciding our own foreign policy and initiatives and making our own choices. First is formation of DARPA like body to develop critical technologies, to invest in high risk and high reward technologies, where you fail fast, but if you don't really are going ahead, not like 30 years, not like 30 years for LC or Akash, you close the chapter. But you only focus on developing the technology which is uptaken by then either private sector or public sector, and then they make the product. We need to have a regulatory body to segment Indian industry. Why I say so? Because there can't be a competition for making submarines and making ships. It's too complicated, because somebody who makes the submarines Even in US, we have only two companies who make the aircraft, Lockheed Martin and the Boeing. You can't have several of them. So competition has to, the market segmentation has to come into play. And that is being very successfully done in Japan, is being done elsewhere. We should also find something. And we need to establish ecosystem for defense industrial base in a tierized manner. The tier has to come in. And we need to find some more ways to have systems like, or ventures like BrahMos, wherein they are funded by the public, but they become private sector. So the both the goodies can be together. And with this, I think since we run short of time, I'd like to close my talk with a thought that we are going in the right direction, but we need to speed up, and we need to speed up really in a big hurry. Thank you very much.